So I wanted to start today, guys. We finally are able to speak openly about a topic that we've been leading on. And I have here my handy dandy Nebraska hat. And we can talk openly about the update out of what happened in Nebraska. Now, we've been working on this, everybody, for the last 6 months, 5 months. Is that right, Blake?
Yeah, it was about April, I think.
And Blake, remind people the story, how we got into this.
Okay, yeah. So the full setup here was we were looking at some polls in about sometime in the spring, about April, and Biden was still in the race then, and there were some polls coming out, and it shook out that if you looked at all of those polls and the averages that were on Real Clear Politics, that if you just assumed the averages were all correct and that was what it would be on Election Day, and you plugged that into the Electoral College, the result would be Joe Biden would win 270 to 268. He would lose Georgia, he would lose Arizona, he would lose Nevada, but he would keep Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. This was Joe Biden's strategy. And I just pointed this out, and then I threw in as an aside, unless Nebraska gets its act together, Charlie, and then you were like, wait, you're right. You were familiar with that facet, of course, yeah. And so you just said, whip up a tweet about that, mention it, and, dig into it, look at what's going on with that. And so I did a little digging. I saw that a senator in Nebraska had actually introduced a winner-take-all bill. But
Phil Lippincott.
Yep. Senator Lippincott, he'd introduced it, and it was just held up in the legislature. Apparently it wasn't going to go forward. And they were still in session then, so our initial thing was, let's whip up some pressure on the legislature.
Let me interrupt you. At the time, Rana and the RNC had no plan for this. There was no concern. Not a single person anywhere made this a priority until the Charlie Kirk show and Turning Point Action. Right, Blake?
Yeah, and it was wild how rapid the response was on Twitter, because, we just laid it out that this is, I think the book wasn't out yet, but you talked about in the book that you need a Republican Party that wants to win, and this is an electoral vote that's there. And as we said, this wasn't illegal or underhanded. This wasn't some gross distortion of electoral proceedings. It was make Nebraska's rule the same as all 48 of the other 50 states, and have it be winner take all. We would take this vote that was very likely to go blue and make it red, and it could save us from losing in a situation that wasn't the most likely, like the dominant outcome, but it was a very real possibility. And so this produced this huge response, and what I loved about it was how not only did we whip people up, but you were immediately like calling people, saying, "Look, let's get a venue in Nebraska, in Omaha, get some people there."
We got over 1,500 people. Andrew, you were there. We created a whole war room strategy, and I want to be clear, Andrew, talk about that event, but also some people in the audience say, "Oh, Charlie, you let this issue go." No, guys. That's what we're here finally able to talk openly about. For the last 5 months, on a daily basis, including multiple trips to Nebraska, we've been working on this issue. Andrew, talk about how we took this and we didn't let this go.
Well, my favorite piece of this whole story is actually the New York Times, The Daily. Their podcast did a whole episode just on what this audience, what this show, what Charlie did and Turning Point did to create this and make this a national news story. They laid the timeline out from the time of the tweet to the broadcast. They actually had clips of Charlie on air. And next thing you know, there was a comment from Governor Pillen within hours, because you guys in this audience lit up the phone boards in Nebraska. You were calling your legislators, Nebraskans were. And then Trump went out on Truth, did a Truth social post about it. So within less than 24 hours, this became a national news story. And it was all because of this audience. It was all because of the work everybody was doing. And then I think to Blake's point, it was like 5 days, about 5 or 6 days later, we had a whole event, winner take all rally in Omaha. And massive attendance. It was standing room only. The energy was through the roof. The grassroots were pumped up and excited about this because they call this the blue dot in the middle of Nebraska. And Charlie, one thing I would love for you to talk about and explain is how this blue dot invites all of this outside the state of Nebraska money to pour into Omaha. So you've got a state that would absolutely go completely for Trump, except for this one up for grabs district. And so tons of outside money, millions and millions and millions, pours in for one electoral vote. And I think it really is a disservice to the people of Nebraska to allow that to continue. But alas, here we are.
Well, and we're about to get to the update. And so all throughout June, all throughout July, all throughout August, we were lobbying and we were doing vote counting. So what happened in Nebraska is they did a special session for property tax relief that went terribly. It was a disaster. And we were told, okay, just wait. Now, of course, we were cynical. We said, I don't know. This seems like they're trying to run out the clock.
Slow playing it, yeah.
I said, but we're not going to let you guys escape that easily. Like, if you guys, mess this up, we're going to tell the story publicly, which is what we're doing now. And so we started to see a lack of priority here. And let me be very clear. This Nebraska example is the greatest example in my 12 years of doing this that I've ever found about how the Republican Party does not care about saving America. I'm sorry. They care about other things. They care about football tickets.
Very much.
Like the football tickets that these senators have, these state senators have, they're unbelievable, right, Blake?
They're really good.
Yeah, we went into Larry the Cable Guy's booth, who's a great guy.
He's great. That was great.
He's a hero.
He really wanted to help out, too. It was amazing.
He's a hero in this story.
Yeah.
And there are state senators that they have no business being in that. I mean, unless there's some sort of deal getting cut. And so they care about that. And so we went there a week and a half ago, right, Blake?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And we left it all on the field. By the way, that's where I lost my voice because I was out there doing interviews for like an hour and a half. And then Pennsylvania didn't help. And when I confronted, and we met with the governor, and I'll tell you about that, because the governor's a good actor in this story, but I think he could have done more. But that's a separate issue. And when I was talking to some of these senators and some of the people involved, they kept on saying, yeah, but it would just invite too much controversy. I kid you not, everybody. So just to be very clear, Kamala Harris might become president because of this. And we'll walk through the breaking news. Yesterday, the swing vote, Mike McDonald, who's not the villain of the story, actually. I think he's actually covering for some of the other senators.
Yeah, I think he's the guy they put all the attention on.
100%.
And the idiom he uses, he didn't want to be caught holding his you-know-what, because he was a Democrat who'd become a Republican. He's from
Omaha.
He's from Omaha. He's from one of those districts. So it involves this. And so they put all the attention on him. And I think really he was willing to do it, but he wasn't going to do it if it wasn't going to happen.
Correct.
And so he came out and announced this because it was clear it wasn't going to happen. And you know more about that.
Yeah, and I don't think Mike McDonald... So all the headlines are Mike McDonald. It's very smart the way they did this, is they have the former Dem kind of take all the arrows. Oh, okay, yeah, he wants to be mayor. That's not the real story here. And I'm here to tell you what the real story is. The real story is that they were short 2 votes of Republicans that are not former Democrats that did not want to change the system. And I talked to one of them. And I'm going to tell you their names. And because I don't care, And because I actually think Mike McDonald wanted to do the right thing. He seemed like a nice guy. Met him. You met him, right, Blake? He seemed like a sincere, but there were a couple other people involved in Nebraska that wanted nothing to do with changing this. And let me say this as clearly as I can. They don't care about the future of America. When I presented with them, I showed them the map. I said, you realize Kamala could win because of this. And one of the senators told me, well, that's not my problem. I said, well, yeah, it is. He said, no, not my problem. Thank you. And he walked away. True story. I'll tell you who that is after the break. That is the mentality of the Republican Party across the country. And so we received this bad news yesterday. We lobbied like crazy, public awareness, behind the scenes, everything we could. And we received this disappointing news.